Physical Gold Fund presents The Gold Chronicles with Jim Rickards. Insights and analysis about economics, geopolitics, global finance, and gold. Hello, I'm John Ward on behalf of Physical Gold Fund. We're delighted to welcome you to the latest webinar with Jim Rickards in the series we're calling The Gold Chronicles. Jim Rickards is a New York Times best-selling author and the chief global strategist for West Shore Funds. He's the former general counsel of long-term capital management. He's a consultant to the U.S. intelligence community and to the Department of Defense. He's also an advisory board member of Physical Gold Fund. Hello, Jim, and welcome.
Hi, John. How are you? It's great to be with you.
It's good to be with you, too. And we also have with us here Alex Stanzik, the Managing Director of Physical Gold Fund. Hello, Alex.
Hello, John. Great to be here. Exciting times we've got going on right now.
It is indeed. Alex will be looking out for questions that come from you, our listeners. So let me just say that your questions for Jim Rickards today are more than welcome. You can post them at any point during the interview. You'll see a box on your screen for typing in your question, and as time allows, we'll do our best to respond to you. By the way, I'll be announcing a special Q&A webinar with Jim at the end, so stay tuned for that. Jim, your book, The New Case for Gold, has just been published and you're already garnering great reviews. What's more, you've hit the #1 spot for the money category on Amazon in all three formats, hardback, Kindle, and audio. Congratulations. And I believe you have some breaking news about the book for us.
First of all, John, thank you very much for those kind words. As an author, you hope most of all that people read the book. You write it and you hope it gets out there, and it seems to be exactly what's happening. We're getting good traction, good uptake. And Amazon is it's about half the market. Of course, the independent booksellers are still a big part of the market, and we have very good relations with them in terms of our distribution. But Amazon's they're the 500-pound gorilla, and they have many subcategories. They break the books down by topic, fiction, nonfiction, and then many, many subcategories. But there are a number of subcategories, specifically one called commodities, one called economic policy, another one called money and monetary policy, etc. And we hit #1 in every one of those categories. And if you go to those lists, you can go to the homepage for the New Case for Gold on Amazon and just kind of scroll down a little bit, and you'll see these rankings that we're talking about. And you can click on them if you're interested. But we're up against some very heavyweight competition. I mean, just the other books that are out there in the categories I mentioned. Mervyn King, for many years, the governor of the Bank of England, has a new book. George Gilder, a brilliant thinker, a veteran of the Reagan Revolution, and a very forward-leaning writer and analyst, has a new book on the kind of current malaise in the international monetary system. Of course, the heavyweights, Thomas Piketty, Capital in the 21st Century. So these are the books we're up against, and these are great authors and great books. And to see the New Case for Gold kind of ranked #1, and not just on the hardcover, but Kindle, ebook, and the audiobook is very, very gratifying. By the way, for fans of audiobooks, and I'm one of them, I just do a lot of driving. It's nice to pop an audiobook, on the Bluetooth and listen to it on the drive. But this is the first one of my books where I actually read the book. The other books, Currency Wars and The Death of Money, are available in audio versions, but they were read by professional voice actors, which is fine. One of the things I've learned in this process is that these voice actors have their own fans and following, and people like certain readers over others. But this one I read myself. And it was a very interesting experience. Spent 2 days in the studio with a really, really talented voice director. I call him the Stanley Kubrick of voice directors. He stopped me probably 1,000 times and said, Jim, I'm not hearing the D in started. Just really very big on enunciation. So I learned a thing or two in that process. But it's in my own voice, and I know that when I buy audiobooks, I like ones that are read by the author, because I think only the author can get all the inflection and nuance just right, assuming you can get through the recording process. So that's a nice plus. Having said all of that, we do have some breaking news. I just learned an hour ago from my publisher that we have debuted on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list, business bestsellers, number 6 for our first week, which is very, very gratifying. There's a whole, I'll say, art or culture in the publishing industry. A lot of people throw the word bestseller around loosely. I'm a bestseller this, a bestseller that. And it could mean as little as, they made one of these subcategories, which is fine. I mean, that's a great accomplishment for any author. But when you talk to the big publishers, as far as they're concerned, there are only a couple lists that matter. And, of course, the Wall Street Journal is the largest circulation newspaper, definitely in the United States, possibly the world. So, and they're very rigorous about how they monitor these things. So, and this is not a subcategory. This is all the hardcover nonfiction in the world, and to come out in the business list number 6 was very, very satisfying. So we're a national bestseller in addition to all the Amazon kudos, and in addition to that, and I'm very pleased with this. Amazon allows peer review, so anybody can log on and say, I like the book or I don't like the book or whatever. They have a 5-star scale, and we have 4.7 stars. And if it doesn't sound like an A report card, trust me, it is, because nobody gets 5 stars. It only takes one sort of a negative voice to knock you off of a perfect 5.0. But if you look at a lot of really well-known authors and celebrities and others, many of them are kind of in the 2 to 3 star category, which is fine. But we've got 4.7 stars and lots of 5-star reviews on Amazon. So that's kind of the voice of the everyday reader. That's not the book review at the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. That's people who actually buy the book, read it, and take the time to express their views. So we're very happy with that. So good traction, good sales, over 40,000 copies sold, which is extraordinary. And in all editions, that's hardcover, Kindle, and audiobook. And we're just getting started. The book's only been out a little over a week. April 5th was our launch date. We're just getting the results in the first week of sales. That's why all these announcements that we're talking about are coming in right now. So very happy to see it as an author. I hope the readers enjoy it. I know they are because of the feedback we're getting. And again, I can't thank you and Alex and the Physical Gold Fund team because, of course, this was a team effort. This book started from the podcast. Actually, the podcast we're doing now was the earlier ones were the origin of the book. We put some new stuff in because we always want to make it really fresh for the readers. So there is some new writing and new material in it, but it has its roots in this Physical Gold Fund podcast series. So very happy with that as well. And I can just say if it wasn't for you and Alex and the Physical Gold Fund team, this book wouldn't exist. So thank you. And again, I hope the readers enjoy it.
Thanks, Jim. And yes, and again, congratulations. That latest news for the Wall Street Journal is really fantastic. So, of course, those of you listening have got your copy but in case you haven't, go ahead and enjoy the book. It is very readable. And indeed, if you like it, add your voice to, or whatever you feel. I mean, we want your honest review, but add your voice to Amazon. It's good to have that community there. Now, Jim, I'd like to ask you about one of the fundamentals that you discuss in the new case for gold. It's something you've talked about here several times, your strongly held view that gold is not a commodity, not an investment, that gold is money. Now, for a moment, for this question, I'd like to take that principle as read. And my question is this. There are lots of valuable commodities in the world we could use as a store of wealth and token of exchange and presumably as a unit of measurement. What about gold in particular makes it suited to serve as money? Not just today, but it has indeed for the past several thousand years.
It's a great question, John, and one of my favorite, and I get that question in many versions. Once I was a guest on CNBC Squawk Box. I was on the set with Joe Kernan and Becky Quick. There's nothing like live TV. You're really out there on the high wire. There's no the anchors get a teleprompter, but I don't. I just have to sort of go with the flow. And Joe Kiernan, who has I think he's a really good guy, smart guy, but has a reputation as a bit of a curmudgeon or a guy who likes to play devil's advocate quite a bit. And that's probably good journalism. Certainly makes for good TV. But he said to me, I was talking about gold. And he said, well, my wife collects, I guess she is a potter. She makes pottery or has a pottery collection. He said, why can't we have a pottery standard? Why can't my wife's pottery be the monetary standard of the world? In other words, the variation of the question you're asking. And I thought to myself, well, I hope you don't drop it because it breaks, and I hope it doesn't rain because it dissolves and it wears out over time. And there are lots and lots of reasons. So to kind of put a finer point on it, A lot of people disparage reference to gold as a monetary standard, almost because of its attractions. I mean, gold is pretty attractive. You know, it is a nice color. Interesting chemical fact I learned: there is no substitute for gold if you want a gold color, meaning if you want to gild something or decorate something and you want it to be gold, you actually have to use some real gold because there's no substitute. Now people use, the Lexus, the logo on a Lexus automobile, looks gold, but it's just really anodized aluminum. And a lot of things that purport to be gold are really kind of mustard color. You cannot imitate the color of gold without using a little bit of gold. It says something there, but we find it attractive. But that is not, to me, that's a plus, but that's not the reason gold is the best form of money. And by the way, to go back to the beginning of the question where I said gold is not an investment, gold is money. It's as simple as that. I wrote a column recently where I said gold is a chameleon, and what I meant by that is that at different times, my view is fine. My view happens to be the view of Pierpont Morgan, who testified before Congress in, I think it was 1908 or thereabouts, could be off by a year or two, but testified before Congress, and he said, money is gold and nothing else, period. Just to him, money was gold, or gold is money if you apply a transitive law, and he didn't want to hear about it. Everything else was sort of a token or a substitute, but gold was the only form of money, and I agree with that. But it's one thing to have a view, but we have to live in the real world, and we have to make our investment decisions and our portfolio allocations based on the reality we face. And the truth is, a lot of people think about gold as a commodity. They trade on commodity exchanges. When you hear about gold on Bloomberg or CNBC or Fox Business, they're reporting from the commodity pits right next to, sugar, cocoa, and iron ore and copper and other kinds of commodities. No question about that. Gold is frequently referred to as an investment. Investment advisors, they mostly don't like it. Some do like it, but though, and our friend Warren Buffett, one of the most successful investors of all time, never has a good word to say about gold. He doesn't like it because it doesn't have a yield, which I've explained it's not supposed to have a yield because money doesn't have a yield. If you want yield, you have to take risk. And, if I have an ounce of gold and I put it in a drawer and I go away for a year and I come back and I open the drawer, I still have an ounce of gold. It didn't go up, it didn't go down, it didn't shrink, it didn't expand. It's just there. And, take a dollar bill out of your wallet, hold it up in front of you, out of your wallet or out of your purse, hold it up in front of you. What's the yield? It's zero. In other words, you're holding money, a form of money. A dollar is money, certainly, and it has no yield. Bitcoin is a form of money, and it has no yield. So Bitcoin, dollar bills, gold have no yield. They're not supposed to have a yield because they're money. If you want a yield, you have to convert it into something else. Could be a bank deposit. People say, I have money in the bank. And I say, you don't have money in the bank. What you have is a bank deposit, which is an unsecured liability of an occasionally insolvent financial institution. So it's not really money. I'm not saying pull all your money out of the bank. I'm not saying don't trust the system. What I am saying is that don't fool yourself. Anything other than physical possession is not money. So gold is money. That explains why it has no yield. But why gold? And that is your question, John. Why not copper? Why not iron ore? Why not other precious metals or other things that could possibly be money? And I talked about this in Chapter 2 of The New Case for Gold. Quote the work of a Professor Sella from the UK, and he did a fascinating interview, and he's a chemist, and he went through the periodic table of the elements. So periodic table of the elements is just a list and a chart. I'm sure we all remember it, some of us with more affection or perhaps more pain than others, but we remember that chart from our high school chemistry classes. And it has everything in the universe, every known element in the universe. Everything you see, just look around you. You might be outside, you might be at your desk, you might be at work, you might be home, you might be having a cup of coffee, look up in the sky, look around. Everything you see is composed of an element from the periodic table of the elements. Now, they sometimes combine into molecules, and the molecules take different forms and so forth, but it all comes down to the periodic table of the elements. There is nothing in the material world that's not on that chart. So what Professor Sella did, he went through the chart, and he said, let's just ask ourselves, could any of these things be money? He said, well, there are a bunch of gases, right? There's argon and oxygen and hydrogen. Those are all elements, but they also float up in the sky. I mean, do you want money in the form of gas? Not very practical. He then found another cluster, including sodium and other elements, which dissolve on contact with water. It's bad enough that the central banks, dissolve our currency, but you certainly don't want your currency to disappear when it rains. So there was a whole category that he said this is really not suitable for money. I think Joe Kernan's wife's clay pots would fall into this category somehow. But you don't want things that dissolve when it rains. Then he found a large category of elements that were radioactive. Uranium's an element, and plutonium and radium, and there are other elements. Well, we certainly don't want money that's going to, have radioactivity and give us cancer. So the point is, he systematically went through the entire periodic table of the elements. I think there were some new ones just discovered, by the way. It was interesting when I was sending the new case for gold to the publisher. You have what's called author's page pass, and it's last call. It's like, okay, if you want to change anything, if there are any facts wrong, fix it now, because this thing's going to the printers. Last call. And you can't do big rewriting in that circumstance. You can only really do a little fact check and change a word here and there. And literally a couple of days before I was doing the author's page pass on the new case for gold, I saw some physics announcements that they had discovered some new elements. So I had to go back to that page, and I think there were like 109 or something. All of a sudden it was 118. So the book's completely up to date. When you get the book, you're going to learn about the 118th element, which was just discovered. But the point is, a lot of them are super, super rare. And they can only be created, the colliders. So the point being, you'd like your money to be rare, but not that rare. You don't want a kind of money that only exists one time in the history of the universe inside a super collider. So that's no good. So he went through the whole, and he said really only four, just even base metals, copper corrodes, iron rusts. Again, you don't want money that's going to rust or corrode or turn funny colors or is exceedingly rare. So through a process of elimination, he said there are only four that are really suitable for money, given the fact that you don't want it to rust or corrode, etc. They're actually called the noble metals, and I think most of the listeners know what they are. It's gold, silver, platinum, and palladium. Those are the only four that don't have all the disabilities we just mentioned, which obviously include radioactivity. Arsenic was another one. That's my favorite. Arsenic's poisonous, so you don't want things that are poisonous, radioactive, gaseous, or can only be found in super colliders. So there were those four, and they said, okay, let's just take those four, ask ourselves, actually, silver is a precious metal, but it does corrode a little bit on contact with air. If you have silver, you got to polish it every now and then. That's because it does corrode a little bit. Gold does not. Gold is actually really, really hard to destroy. I mean, you can blow it up with dynamite, but all you do is scatter the gold molecules all over, and they fall to the ground, and eventually they come back in the form of flakes or nuggets. So you can't get rid of gold. Literally impossible to destroy. And gold is the only one that's gold. The other three, silver, platinum, and palladium, are kind of silverish or grayish, depending on your pick. And platinum and palladium are almost too scarce. Again, you want it to be scarce, but not so scarce that you wouldn't have a fairly steady increase. And silver has this corrosive element to it. Although I own some silver, I'm not a silver basher. Obviously, I'm an advocate for gold. I think a monster box of 500 1-ounce American Silver Eagle coins. To me, that's like having a flashlight and batteries for a hurricane. The power grid goes out, and you can't get your ATMs, and the gas station, pumps don't work, and the credit card readers don't work, etc. Having a bunch of silver dollars in your pocket, pure silver, not the kind of fake silver dollars that the U.S. government circulates, but real silver 1-ounce coins from the mint, is a good emergency kind of money to have. But having said that, Professor Sella basically disqualified every single element except gold. And the reason I'm spending so much time on this is to make the point that gold bashers like to disparage you. They like to say, Joe Weisenthal on Bloomberg says it's a pile of rocks. And I was on with him once. I said, Joe, they're not rocks, it's metal. So you ought to get that right. But, shiny pile of rocks. You hear phrases like that all the time. They're probably meant half in jest, but they're very ill-informed. And I thought this survey of, again, the periodic table of the elements, showing why basically everything in the universe is not suitable for money except gold. And so it's no coincidence that, beginning 5,000 years ago in civilization, that gold was money. Beginning 2,500 years ago, rulers in the Middle East and present-day Turkey, Hittite kingdom at the time, began to mint gold coins and put them into circulation, and even further back in prehistory, but during the stage when humans existed in communities, we find gold objets d'art and gold ornaments. So it has always been valued. It has always been money, and it's not coincidence. There are very, very good reasons for it. Now, one last footnote. People say, well, okay, fine, Jim, I hear you, but, we used to drive around in horses and buggies. We used to travel on foot. We used to travel by sail, and today we have, steamships and the internet and automobiles and airplanes, and so maybe something was useful once upon a time, but get with it. This is the modern age, and things change, and gold is really not suitable as money. We have a central bank money. What's wrong with that? And I point out that, that's an interesting rhetorical flourish, but we still live in the material world. So what is your money in the bank? What is a money market fund? What is a share of stock traded on the New York Stock Exchange? It's electrons. It's basically electrical charges stored on silicon chips. By the way, silicon is one of the elements in the periodic table of the elements. So you haven't escaped the material world. Going digital, going electronic, does not mean ethereal. It just means you're actually in a physical form on a server. You're in a physical form in the form of electronically charged particles stored on silicon chips and processed on silicon chips. So your so-called money, your money in the bank, your money market fund, it exists in physical form as electrons on silicon chips. Those can be hacked. Those can be erased. Those can be degraded. Those can be wiped out in power surges. Those can be inaccessible in power outages. In other words, you haven't, maybe in your imagination, you think of this as money, but you have not escaped the laws of physics. Gold cannot be hacked. Gold cannot be erased. Gold cannot be wiped out by North Korean, Russian, Iranian, Syrian, and Chinese cyber brigades, which do exist, by the way. And, I say things like this, and people say, oh, well, that will never happen. And it was only a couple of weeks ago that the country of Bangladesh, one of the poorest countries in the world, saw $100 million of its reserves disappear. Okay, so Bangladesh is one of the poorest countries in the world, but they do have some reserves. They're basically the country's savings from some trade surpluses. And where did they put this money? It was on deposit with the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. It wasn't some, off-the-run cheesy bank in Sri Lanka or Bangladesh or India that we've never heard of. It was on deposit at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, arguably the safest bank in the world, right? Because the Board of Governors in Washington it's just a board. There's no bank in Washington. The Federal Reserve System is organized as 12 regional reserve banks, owned privately, by the way. I think most listeners know that. And the Federal Reserve Bank in New York is the biggest and the strongest. Actually, you go to there. I've been to this many times. Their offices are in a Renaissance-style fortress. If you actually go to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York on between Maiden Lane and Liberty Street in Lower Manhattan, it's a fortress. It looks like something out of the Medici era, but that's a little architectural detail. But it's the strongest, richest bank in the Federal Reserve System, which arguably is the most powerful central bank in the world. So that's where they had the money, and the $100 million disappeared. And if Bangladesh had gold, they'd still have the money. So making hey, Jim, what's wrong with you? Are you technophobic? Aren't you with the modern age? Well, I get it, but I also understand the fact that no matter what you say, you cannot escape the material world. And when you go to the material world, as I explained in Chapter 2 of the New Case for Gold, gold still looks like the best form of money.
You have been listening to The Gold Chronicles with Jim Rickards, presented by Physical Gold Fund. Recordings can be found at physicalgoldfund.com/podcasts. You can register there for news of upcoming interviews with Jim Rickards and other world-class thinkers.